As popular as the Quintessential Quintuplets series is, the finale stirred up quite a storm of controversy among die-hard fans. Everywhere you go on the internet, you'll find a 10 to 15 minute video or an essay-long rant on why the ending sucked. Let me be very clear, I was not Team Yotsuba, I was Team Miku, but personally, I don't think this backlash is warranted, and here's why. The ending of Quintuplets had its flaws. Sure, it felt a bit rushed and there were certainly some odd turns, but it never significantly diverged from the core of the story. The point isn't simply become a better person or put in effort to end up with someone you like. I mean, Miku and Nino observed the greatest development, but simply trying hard doesn't entitle them to be with anyone. It shouldn't in a story, and it shouldn't in real life. The real point is that though only one of them will marry Futaro, all of them grow and win together because that's just the nature of a wholesome rom-com. And by the end of the series, we see all of them as one strong family unit born of their collective and individual growth. Quintuplets didn't follow many of the typical harem tropes, and because of its popularity, I think a lot of people set their expectations too high. I feel it's more important to recognize this as a charming love story about 6 people growing alongside one another, and Futaro just happens to marry one of them. Futaro arrived at his decision not based on the girl in the picture or who the bell kisser was, but based on what he knew, and he gives his reasons. As odd as he was, he came to this decision like a normal person, and it makes sense. Yotsuba was the first to accept him as her tutor. She persistently tried to make memorable experiences for him. They were class representatives together. She's the one that taught him to make no regrets. She's the most caring and selfless of all, and for the most part, he always seemed to be comfortable around her. After all, one could even argue it was with Yotsuba when he first started to open up. And yeah, it just so happened that Yotsuba was both the girl in the picture and the bell kisser. If you look back, you'll also see Yotsuba was the 4th Quint to be born and held Futaro's ring finger at the camping trip. Now, was that intentional or coincidental? Who knows? But I think one could argue that all of this comes together quite nicely for them as destined lovers, which is a valid theme, even if you don't prefer that. And can we just take a moment to address Yotsuba's backstory? I simply can't be the only one that was touched by this. How, despite her love for Futaro since childhood, she couldn't bring herself to confess, arguably for fear of hurting her sisters, and for pitifully failing to keep her promise with Uesugi. We all have our misgivings, personal resentments, and things we choose not to share. A side we show others, and a side we do not. We were blind to Yotsuba's true feelings, because that's what Yotsuba wanted. In that sense, we learned she wasn't the silly one-dimensional character some of us thought her to be. And after so much coverage of Miku, Nino, and Ichika, this kept things interesting. Now, could her character have been fleshed out a little more though? Certainly. But let's not pretend there was zero development or clues going on there. And I'm sure some of you are thinking pulling this in the latter half is cheap. And yeah, the red thread of fate is a trope that can sometimes be overplayed. But I don't think that itself is grounds for a bad ending, nor does this devalue the time spent on the other Quints. To that end, I think one could even argue that if we saw too much of Yotsuba and Futaro, the other character arcs wouldn't hold as much weight, and possibly the outcome would have been too easy to guess. And where would the fun in that be? Now make no mistake, if I could, I would definitely tweak some things. I probably would have kept Ichika as the bell kisser, or even swapped that role for Itsuki for a more balanced romance dynamic. I also wouldn't have had all the Quints kissing Futaro in their respective festival chapters. Though each Quint is equally important, the bell kiss was really weighted, so I feel like each of them kissing him diminishes the value of such an act. I would have Nino more clearly realize she fell for Futaro because she misses her father. It wouldn't invalidate her feelings, but she would more gracefully be able to move forward in life. Have Itsuki realize she loves Futaro too, but was ultimately following her mother's footsteps since her mother also fell for her teacher. With this realization, she would gain further resolve to follow her own path. Add a little more emotional weight to the end of Miku's arc. It wouldn't hurt to see some tears flowing as she smiles or laughs, representing her acceptance to let go as she learns to love herself. Have Yotsuba more strongly assert her feelings for Futaro to her sisters, while slowing the pacing of the ending a tad. And finally, have all, or at least some of the Quints, find another person they love and can have for themselves by the end. It doesn't necessarily matter who, or if we even see them. It doesn't make their experiences with Futaro meaningless, but it would show that even in romance, life moves on, and it's okay to fall in love again. Nino. But you know what? These are all things I'm nitpicking for an ideal story. I'm sure you have your own tweaks to make too. This wasn't a perfect ending, but it was happy, wholesome, and everyone's arcs were sufficiently concluded. Ichika grew from her faults and led a successful acting career. Nino, though disappointed, learned how to leave the nest of her past and resolved her fatherly issues. Itsuki realized that though she wants to be like her mom, she ultimately wants to lead a life of her own accord. Miku gained the strength and confidence to love herself without Futaro's validation. Futaro learned to differentiate the others because he loved all 5 of them. Yotsuba finally lived up to her promise from all those years ago, and even got to marry the man she's always loved. And finally, by the end, They're able to stand alongside one another as one happy and supportive family with no regrets. For a wholesome harem rom-com about family and friendship, it really doesn't get much better than that. I'm Wolf Manga, I hope you appreciate my perspective, and I thank you so much for watching.